something out there for shock value. So let's dig into exactly why this specific idea makes so much sense, both from the Colts side and from the Bears side. Here's the foundation of the whole argument. It starts with contract timing, which honestly might be the single most important factor in whether this trade ever actually happens. Reportedly, Taylor is heading into the final year of his current contract. And in this league, that's an enormous, enormous deal for a running back specifically because of just how brutal this position is on a player's body and how short running back careers tend to be compared to basically every other position on the field. Reportedly, it's genuinely rare for a running back to make it deep enough into his career to even be in position for a legitimate third contract in the first place. Most guys at this position are either out of the league by that point or getting phased into a committee role for pennies on the dollar. So the fact that Taylor is even in this conversation about a big third contract tells you everything about how special a player he's been up to this point in his career. And that sets up the exact tension that makes this trade scenario plausible in the first place. According to the reasoning laid out, if Indianapolis comes out of the gate slow this season and starts seriously considering some kind of organizational shakeup midway through the year, that's exactly the kind of environment where a star player entering a contract year would reportedly draw real, legitimate trade interest from around the league. Dre's personal opinion, that's just pure cold roster logic, and honestly, it happens in this league every single year around the trade deadline. A team that's suddenly out of playoff contention, sitting on a star player who's about to hit free agency, has to make a genuinely hard decision. Do you pay a premium to keep him and risk losing him for nothing next offseason anyway? Or do you flip him now for future draft capital while his value is still at its peak? That exact fork in the road is precisely the scenario that could put Taylor on the trade block. And here's why Chicago specifically makes so much sense as a landing spot if that scenario actually plays out. Reportedly, the ideal trade partner for a rental like this is a team that's genuinely chasing the playoffs. But that lacks one true dominant workhorse starter they can lean on when it matters most. Dre's personal opinion, that description fits Chicago's current running back situation almost perfectly, and I think that's exactly why this specific idea has gained so much traction. This isn't some random team getting linked to a star running back just because they need bodies. This is a very specific, very intentional fit based on exactly what type of roster construction benefits most from adding a player like this. Now let's actually talk about Jonathan Taylor as a player for a second, because I don't think casual fans around this league fully appreciate exactly how good this guy has been. Reportedly, through the first 10 games of last season, he was putting up numbers that had him on a legitimate MVP caliber trajectory. We're talking just under 1,200 rushing yards through only 10 games played. Now, would he have actually won an MVP award with a pace like that? Probably not, purely because voters historically undervalue running backs for that specific award, no matter how dominant the numbers are. But Dre's personal opinion, the fact that he was even in that statistical conversation through 10 games tells you exactly how ridiculous of a season he was putting together before it ended. And this isn't even a one-year fluke either. Reportedly, over the past 2 full seasons combined, he sits second in the entire NFL in total rushing yardage, trailing only one other legendary workhorse back who's widely considered one of the greatest pure runners of this entire generation. And get this, reportedly those two backs are literally the only 2 players in this whole league who've rushed for more than 3,000 yards combined over that same 2-year stretch. That's not just good. That's genuinely elite, top of the league production, sustained over multiple seasons, not just one hot stretch. And here's what makes it even more impressive when you dig deeper, reportedly. He's been putting up these numbers behind an offense that hasn't exactly been a juggernaut through the air. One of those 2 seasons, his starting quarterback was dealing with real struggles for a chunk of the year, and he still rushed for well over 1,400 yards that season, despite all that instability around him. Dre's personal opinion, it tells you this guy isn't just a product of a great system or a great supporting cast carrying him. He's creating a massive chunk of that production purely off his own vision, burst, and pure talent, regardless of what's happening around him on offense. A running back who can put up those kinds of numbers behind shaky quarterback play is exactly the type of difference maker who could transform an offense that already has real infrastructure in place around him. Now let's talk specifically about why this guy would reportedly be such a perfect scheme fit in Chicago. This coaching staff has apparently built one of the most efficient rushing attacks in the entire league, reportedly leading the NFL in rushing success rate last season, thanks largely to genuinely excellent offensive line play combined with sharp, disciplined scheming from the head coach. And the specific style of that scheme, reportedly built heavily around outside zone concepts, is exactly the kind of system where a runner with elite vision and the patience to find the right crease can turn a good gain into an explosive one. Dre's personal opinion, Taylor's game is genuinely tailor-made for exactly that kind of scheme. He's got the vision to identify the hole the instant it opens, and he's got the pure explosive speed to turn that hole into a chunk play the second he hits it. Adding a home run hitter with that specific skill set into an offensive line that's already opening up consistent creases, that's not just addition, that's multiplication. That's the kind of fit where 1 + 1 genuinely does equal 3. Now, I do want to give the current Chicago backfield some real credit here too, because I think it's important we're not sitting here acting like this offense is desperate or broken at the running back position right now. Reportedly, one of the current backs put together a genuinely strong season, and unlike earlier points in his career where durability was a real concern. He's apparently been healthy and available for a solid stretch during his time in Chicago. Dre's personal opinion, and I want to push back gently on some of the criticism I've seen floating around about this specific player. Yeah, it's a completely fair question to wonder whether we saw his absolute ceiling last season, or whether that was more of a product of an improved offensive line and a sharper overall scheme around him. He's shown flashes of being a genuinely frustrating, inconsistent player in stretches of his career, and he's also shown flashes of being a legitimately dependable, efficient starter. At this stage, he might honestly just be what he is, a solid above-average starting option. But maybe not quite the true difference making superstar in this specific offense might ultimately need to reach its absolute ceiling. And then there's the younger back in that same backfield, reportedly a mid-round draft pick, who's already shown some real legitimate promise as a rookie. Reportedly, some criticism has floated around suggesting he can't handle much more than around 10 carries a game, but Dre's personal opinion is that criticism might actually be underselling him a little bit. As a rookie, being brought along gradually and carefully is a completely normal, sensible approach for a coaching staff to take with a young back. That doesn't necessarily mean that's his true ceiling for workload. I genuinely think a guy with his physical running style could reasonably handle somewhere in the range of 12 to 15 carries a game if a coaching staff wanted to lean on him more heavily, and that's without even bringing in a completely new outside piece. He's got legitimate long-term 2 back rotation potential regardless of what happens with this Taylor speculation. But here's the thing, and this is where the Taylor hypothetical gets really exciting to think through. If this trade actually happened, you wouldn't necessarily be replacing either of these 2 backs entirely. You'd more likely be layering a true dominant lead workhorse on top of an already solid rotation, which would allow a coaching staff to actually manage workload much more intelligently across all 3 backs instead of leaning too heavily on any single one of them. Reportedly, in a scenario like that, Taylor would likely be deployed as the clear lead back, probably handling somewhere in the range of 18 to 20 touches a game as the primary option, while the existing rotational back could still carve out a legitimate role in that 8 to 10 touch range as a change of pace complement. Dre's personal opinion, managing touches that way wouldn't just help the offense in the short term. It could actually help preserve Taylor's long-term durability too, since you wouldn't be forcing him into an overwhelming bell cow workload the way some other feature backs around this league get pushed into. Now let's talk about something that genuinely surprised me when I dug into it, because I think it flies under the radar for a lot of fans who mostly know this guy purely as a pure between the tackles runner, his development as a receiver out of the backfield. Reportedly, he came into this league without much of a reputation as a pass catcher at all. But last season, he actually posted career highs in both catches and receiving yardage, reportedly hauling in 46 receptions for 328 yards. Now, Dre's personal opinion, is he some kind of elite dynamic pass-catching weapon on the level of the truly special receiving backs this league has seen? No, not really, and it wouldn't be fair to oversell that part of his game. But what that improvement does tell you is that this is a player who's actively continuing to expand his overall skill set, even as he's already established himself as one of the premier pure runners in this entire league. A running back who can legitimately stay on the field on third down, who can be trusted in the screen game and the check down game instead of getting subbed out for a passing down specialist, adds a whole different layer of value to an offense beyond just early down production. So now let's actually dig into the mechanics of whether this trade could realistically happen. Because a bold prediction is one thing, but the actual roster and schedule circumstances matter enormously here too. It's genuinely important to understand exactly where Indianapolis stands as an organization heading into this season, because reportedly they have been going all in over the last couple off seasons. They've reportedly committed real long-term money to their starting quarterback, and they reportedly made an aggressive trade for a star cornerback at last year's deadline, giving up real draft capital in that deal, enough that they reportedly don't currently have their own first-round pick for the upcoming draft. Dre's personal opinion, when a franchise has already mortgaged future draft capital chasing a championship window, that tells you they're fully committed to winning now, which means their coaching staff and front office leadership are almost certainly operating under real tangible pressure to deliver results immediately. And when you actually look at their upcoming schedule, reportedly, the opening stretch is absolutely brutal. We're talking a murderer's row of tough opponents right out of the gate, followed by a trip overseas for an international game, followed by a genuinely difficult road matchup before the schedule eventually eases up a little bit in the middle portion of the season. Dre's personal opinion, with a schedule that front-loaded and that difficult, it is completely realistic to imagine a scenario where this team starts the season somewhere around 2 wins and 7 losses, or maybe 3 and 6, heading into that stretch right around the trade deadline. And if that quarterback, who reportedly was already showing some real decline before a serious injury last season and is now working his way back from a torn Achilles, starts struggling on top of a rough overall team record, that's exactly the combination of factors that could push a front office toward exactly the kind of full organizational reset that makes trading away a star running back on an expiring contract make total sense. And here's the layer of this that I think most people are completely missing. Because it's not just about whether Indianapolis wants to keep or trade Taylor in a vacuum. It's about what trading him could actually unlock for their broader long-term rebuild. Reportedly, without their own first-round pick already in hand for next year's draft, this organization currently has no real ability to go get themselves a quarterback prospect in that first round if things fall apart at that position. But if they flip Taylor at the deadline for exactly that kind of premium future draft capital, suddenly they're right back in position to enter that entire draft class conversation at the quarterback position if a full reset ends up becoming necessary. Dre's personal opinion, that's the kind of forward-thinking, multi-layered franchise logic that makes this whole scenario feel a lot less like wild speculation and a lot more like a completely rational business decision a front office might legitimately consider if things go sideways early in the season. Now let's actually run through some realistic trade package scenarios here, because I think this is where the conversation gets really fun to dig into. One version of this deal could involve a full first-round pick changing hands, but Dre's personal opinion is that specific package would really only make sense if Taylor is putting together an absolutely monster season at the time of the trade, and the acquiring team already has a contract extension basically lined up and ready to go. You don't hand over a first-round selection for a pure rental with zero guarantee of keeping the player beyond that single season. That's the kind of move you only make if you're genuinely trying to both win a championship immediately and lock the player up for multiple years beyond that. A more moderate version of this deal could reportedly look something closer to a second-round pick combined with a fourth-round pick without including a first-rounder at all. Dre's personal opinion, if Taylor is playing anywhere close to the level he's shown over the last 2 seasons by the time the deadline rolls around, I genuinely think a package built around a second and a fourth feels like the realistic sweet spot for both sides. Enough real draft capital to make it worthwhile for Indianapolis to move on without completely gutting a Chicago draft class for a half-season rental. And then there's a third, more complicated version of this hypothetical. One that could involve including an existing running back on the roster as part of the return package rather than purely draft capital. Dre's personal opinion on that specific angle, I think Indianapolis would be far more interested in acquiring the veteran back with the expiring contract in a scenario like that rather than the younger, cost-controlled rookie. Purely because you don't want to give up 3 additional years of team control on a promising young player just to sweeten a rental year trade package. That mid-round rookie with legitimate long-term upside is exactly the kind of asset a smart front office holds onto tightly, even in trade discussions for a star like this. So let's zoom all the way out and ask the real question here. Should this trade actually happen if the opportunity presents itself? Dre's personal opinion, and I want to be completely honest with you about the nuance here instead of just giving you a simple yes or no. In a vacuum, right now, before the season is even kicked off, I don't think you make this move. You don't know yet exactly how healthy your existing backfield stays. You don't know exactly how the offensive line holds up over a full season. And you definitely don't know yet whether Indianapolis actually ends up in a position where they're genuinely willing to move him. But if this team is sitting somewhere around 7 wins and 2 losses heading into that deadline, and they genuinely believe one more true difference-making piece could be the exact thing standing between them and a real championship run, then yeah, Dre's personal opinion completely flips. That's exactly the type of situation where you absolutely have to be willing to go get aggressive and make a genuine championship window move, because those specific windows with a genuinely elite roster, real coaching, and a real shot do not come around every single year in this league, and you cannot afford to sit on your hands out of pure caution when a difference maker like this becomes available. So here's what I want to know from you, Dre Talk Sports Fam, and I read every single comment down there, so don't hold back. Do you think this trade actually happens by the time that deadline rolls around, or do you think this ends up being nothing more than a fun offseason hypothetical that never actually materializes into a real transaction? If it does happen, which trade package feels the most realistic to you? Are we talking full first-round pick territory, or does that second and fourth package feel like the more sensible middle ground? And most importantly of all, if this team really does land a